the book would become to me what the rod was in Moses's hand. The book would become to me the last vial of oil in the widow's hand when the prophet asked her, "What did you have?" It was that for me. And so if you ask me what I had in my hand at that point, it was the manuscript.
The following has been a wonderful conversation between Emma Ofosua and I. She affectionately allowed me to call her by the name Emma Ofosua, a name she's known by on a daily basis and even in this conversation. Well, Emma's story inspires me as one that listens to the voice within her heart telling her where to go and even letting her follow the things of God. We really had a great time even as we chit-chatted on her poetry and art beginnings, the creation of the famous Christian creative group Sasa, her entrepreneurship adventures, as well as being the founder of the African Women Poetry Festival. Emma has gone out to do so many amazing stuff, including being a member of the board of the Poetry Association of Ghana. It is wonderful to see her coming out with a new book, I Wish You Courage in the Night Season. A book I fell in love with immediately I had a read, and I suggest that you have a read as well. As a boy from Accra, Ghana, stepping into the adventurous world of podcasting, it was so nice to see her teaching me on ways I could get better even throughout the interview as we went along. Well, my name is Peeman, and this is Speaking of God podcast, where we aim to change the narrative and bring God back into the conversation. This is me with Emma Ofosua. Let's have a great conversation. We are just so excited to have you in this episode of this podcast. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I think it's such a privilege because when I began, I was just checking up on a few stuff that you've done previously, and you've really done a lot in your life. And I just wanted to say big ups to you for all these wonderful achievements. And we'll be speaking so much about that in later on conversation. But I just wanted to know how everything began, because you've been in several circles, you've really done a lot. I just wanted a taste of how everything began and where has this thing taken you so far in your journey?
How much time do we have? Because this sounds like a whole book in the writing. But you kind of, to say I've done so much in my life sounds really huge now. I don't even exactly see like that, but I am humbled to be a vessel that God chooses to use in this time in the capacity that he uses me. And so I think my journey is one of gratitude. I wasn't always clear that it would lead to this point. But one thing I was certain of was that, or one thing I always hoped was that if God had anything to do in these times, he wouldn't do it without me. And that's a prayer I said over and over and over till he started. And I was like, okay, maybe I should have had a conversation to understand what it really means. What it really means when God chooses to use you in a certain capacity, because it certainly comes with its own set of responsibilities. But I'm told it began in primary, especially the love for poetry and writing, but memory plays a trick on me, so I don't remember that clearly. But I know that somewhere in uni or before uni, and from there, it's been writing and wanting in more ways than one to see how I can use writing and poetry, as a matter of fact, to tell my story or to find out who I am as a person, encourage others to do so. And if perchance I happen to make a living out of it, then that's exciting. If not, I was happy to do it. And thankfully, I was able to do both, where I make a living out of writing and still enjoy doing it as a passion. So I guess that's a bit of a summary on what the journey has looked like. But yeah, pretty much.
Oh, so tell me about the graduation, because definitely you started from a single point where a friend recommended you getting into the poetry scene, and then it suddenly became this sort of mashup big thing that you were definitely so much caught up everywhere. It was like a lot of programs just had one name constant, which was Emma Ofosua. So How was that progression like, moving from a single idea where it was like, okay, just jotting out your own stuff, and now you are totally in a big mashup of creatives and all that?
Well, so I grew up. I'm the last from a very large family, really. So most of my siblings are older, much older than I am, and I was a child that didn't exactly know how to process a lot of things that I was seeing, encountering, and all that. So I tended to be a bit more on the angry side, but the kind of anger that you don't have the opportunity to explode, so you internalize. And for me, ranting in front of my mirror was the way I dealt or I worked through some of those emotional issues. And then I met a friend at a friend's birthday party, and she happened to, it was the first time I met her. And it's actually been the last time I met her in person way back in 2009. I haven't seen her in person again, but I got in touch with her a couple of months ago this year. When she heard me speak, she asked me if I was a poet. And then I said I didn't exactly know what that was. And that was way before I even went into uni. So I said I didn't know what it was. And she was like, no, I speak really well. So she thinks that I should actually write. And so for some reason, she had a flip book in her bag and it was new. And so she gave it to me and wrote on the first page and signed off as my poet. So from there, I would start writing instead of ranting in front of the mirror and write anything and everything I thought of. It just turned out that the way I spoke naturally had a bit of a poetic vibe to it. So everything I wrote exactly like I thought it. And I would come to encounter people saying they don't understand me when I speak, or that I tend to speak in parables. And so I would go into uni and stumble into a family called SASA, which is Speakers and Singers Association. And there I still used my writing in ways grow that and the love for seeing people do similar things in community. There I stumbled upon the ability to freestyle. And so because I couldn't memorize my things, and most people were memorizing, and we tended to encourage people to go on stage without actually reading, I would come to find that I had the ability to freestyle on the spot and it still sounded poetic. And so I went into understanding the art behind that, the science behind it, and what it took to do that on a very professional level. So outside of school, I would find similar communities and other friends who did that. And I also volunteered and supported other artists I knew were doing it on a larger scale. Down the line, I would still run SASA for a while, over a decade. I say a while like it was 2 weeks, but yeah, over a decade, I would run SASA and help encourage other poets to write and use their art really to further the gospel, to preach creativity, to preach the gospel creatively. And so we'll do that for a while, and then I was always told to go find a job. So I did go to work. I went into banking for a while. I did a bit of a stint in lifestyle industry. I went into food production, and I still wrote every step of that journey. So I would keep journal upon journal. I have like a stack of old journals that feel part of my library. And I still buy new journals every day. I would write every step of that journey, not knowing where it was leading me. So COVID struck. And when I think the last freelance, a year to when COVID, I mean, 2 years, about 2 years till before COVID, I had gone freelance into project management. So I was doing project events for brands like Vlisco and the others, and pretty much just freelancing because I wanted to do events. I didn't think that writing was a thing that would put bread on my table. So I had to do other things as well. So I was doing events. And then my last gig was about 2 months or so before COVID. What happened with that was I had come to a very critical point in my life where I felt everything was falling apart and I didn't know what exactly I was doing with myself. So I went back into my journal, as I had the habits to do, and to retrace the journey and really see what the patterns had been and where I could rework things, because I didn't understand what was going on at that particular point in my life. So I really had my own standstill before everything came to a standstill. And on that journey of retracing, I found that I had written a lot of things that I thought I would want to share with other people for whatever reason, or that I wanted one thing at least to work in my life. And so if it meant being able to pull together a manuscript, I was happy to do that if that was all I did. And I was able to manage to pull together my first draft of the manuscript. But prior to that, I had tried publishing. So I put it together a few years ago and it didn't really go far. So I wanted to do it again. So I put together this manuscript this time around and had a hard thing through. At that time, I really wasn't doing anything. So I thought, well, maybe try and see if I can print a few copies. I put together a plan, a proposal, got a few friends involved in the process, asked them if they thought they could support me, because I was broke, like broke. I was down to the last. I wouldn't even call it $1, but it was that tough around that time. I had a few friends help me edit, and the book would become to me what the rod was in Moses's hand. The book would become to me the last vial of oil in the widow's hand when the prophet asked her, "What did you have?" It was that for me. And so if you ask me what I had in my hand at that point, it was the manuscript. And that became what the book was. On the back of publishing the book, it opened a lot of doors I didn't know I could have access to. It brought me into spaces I didn't even think that I belonged in. And so for a while, I struggled with the whole phase. But thankfully, on that journey, I met the likes of Rhyme Sonny, who would encourage me every step of the way and make sure that even if I decided to back down, he would ensure I didn't. And so I had friends like that. I had other friends who have made me vow never to mention their names, but for some reason, I had a few people in my corner who made it their life's work at that time to ensure that if I found it difficult to push ahead, they would be there to encourage me and pick me up and make sure I kept pushing. So on the back of that, I would do a lot of corporate gigs. I would do a lot of shows. I would be able to do a local tour and tour all of Ghana with the book, and then do an international tour on the back of the book. So really, if you ask me how, I don't exactly have a blueprint to say step 1, do this, step 2, do that. I would say that I dared to eat my last bread, hoping to die. I dared to use my last vial to serve the prophet. That one particular thing in my hand, if I place it at the altar, you sacrifice it and it burns up, and that's pretty much it. And it took on a life of its own. And so I am here today just by grace. So when you say I've done a lot in my life, I sit back and I wonder, did I really do that? But I think that God was willing. It was time. He chose that time to elevate me, and I was available. I was broken to a point where he could use me. And I think he's a master of using broken things and turning it around. And that was why I found myself at the lowest, broken and unsure what the path looked like. And when I surrendered what I had, he turned it around. So
it's definitely been a total elaboration here. And actually, we are just seeing the true life of a creative entrepreneur. She's actually the pure example of that. And only Emma Ofosua can put up the words, "I dared to." And so it's such a great thing, even listening to this story. And it's very encouraging to us. And I'm just going to go back a bit, even in the preparation towards all these things and getting to even to this point, talking about the fact that Sasa, you spent about almost a decade, even in the preparation. Talk to us about even what goes on, even behind the scenes, because you are sort of the eye that needs to be taken seriously, because you've been in almost all these circles before. And in case we want an eye that has seen it all, it's definitely Emma Ofosua. So take us through all the preparation that goes on, even in hosting event preparation, venues, frustration points, what do we miss apart from the nice cocktails? What do we miss in events and all those things that perhaps were things God was preparing you for?
A lot of crazy behind the scenes. The period in which we ran SASA at its most vibrant stage was a phase where most of us didn't have money. And so we relied heavily on favor and on the goodwill of people. And at that time, I learned a lot of negotiation skills because I would have to go to event venues and make sure that they were willing to give us their space at no cost and be able to talk to people, sell a dream to people and let them buy into it without actually parting with money. And so that skill negotiating came in very handy when I had to pivot and ride solo certain phases of my life when I didn't have money. I had the ability to sell a story and get people to buy into it. And I think those skills were honed in those phases where we were growing and developing SASA. You would have like a week to an event and not be sure who is doing your lighting, who is taking care of the sound, who is doing what, and place so many calls and count on the fact that someone would show up. It also taught me to really, really, really understand this thing called faith, because there were so many magnificent things we did as a team, as a group of young, exciting, exuberant people that people only stood by and wondered if we had big funding, but we didn't have any grant or any support like that. Over the years, people would grow through SASA and become quite significant in their own spaces. You have the likes of Kokusi doing amazing with their rap. You have the Someones, you have the Eldads. People picked up leadership skills. People had the opportunity to develop their craft. And for me, the excitement is that even in that journey of learning to be resourceful with very little, we were able to live up to the mandate we set for ourselves, to nurture people, to be able to help make or render the graveyard a very poor place so that people don't die with their gifts and talent. And we've not exhausted that, but I think we've done the most we can with that process. So the journey leading that was a lot of learning, a lot of understanding what to do with things in seed form and understand what it meant to really build your own table if you have it, because that was what we did for the most part in SASA. We built our own platforms and tables, and we made sure that we invited a lot more to that table. So it was a lot of hard work, a lot of training, a lot of going through that process, and it was worth it. Eventually it was.
And off the record, I just also wanted to thank you for even creating a space for me to even have my talent displayed. So I just want to just say I'm appreciative of all that you did in those times. And even as God was preparing you, He was using that to also give us some kind of first gift. So we're just grateful for that. But definitely
But I just wanted to quickly chip in that, okay, so even though I labored so much in that playfield, it wasn't my vision to birth. SASA was founded by Selom Tamaklo, and I happened to be, call it an assignment partner, but I tended to that vision because I could identify strongly with it. Yes, so yeah, we give glory to God for that. Yeah.
And it's so much cherishing to see all that goes on within the ecosystem. So definitely I'll be speaking to Selom later, but you've really pioneered a lot of stuff, and I wasn't just making a light and when I said you've achieved so much. So even within the craziness, it's such an example to us all that once you really believe in the things that God has given you, you should go for it and God will back you up. So Emma, thank you so much. But I was just also watching a few of your videos. I remember one that you did around City TV, and I wanted to talk about a bit of public speaking. Definitely you do freestyle off, and it's, in case for those who don't know poetry, doing freestyle is no joke. But Emma can just do it on a proper stage. So you could say she's one of the best. But I remember that you made mention of one thing that inspired you when you're just taking a trip to one place in Hull, and you specifically had a poem called Adaklu. if I'm right on that. One thing that was very enviable to me was your diction and your pronunciations of word. So what have you learned so much in public speaking, and what has the training been like from your first time you jotted down stuff to even having to present it on stage and all that? What do we have to take notes when we are speaking publicly, and what do we have to learn from that?
I told you a bit about what growing up looked like, and I love to read. I try now to read as much as I used to, even though I don't do a lot of that. But the trick is to read as much. But the other thing there is to speak on something you are very comfortable and passionate about. Because then when the subject is something that you know through and through, you don't exactly panic when you are talking through it. So the things I talk about are things I know. It comes from a very real and personal place. Or they are things I have experienced, or I have been able to empathize to a level of owning the story and being able to tell it well. So reading, listening to a lot of podcasts. I am a sucker for YouTube videos. Like, that's when people play music on long trips, I listen to sermons and podcasts on long trips. That's how weird it gets. So I get to listen to that's how I get to listen to a lot of people speaking, and I learn a lot more about how to continue to tell my story in a way that meets a certain standard as I have come to set for myself. So I think the two things around that I would say is, one, don't ever stop reading and learning, and two, pick a subject that you're very comfortable about, and then telling the story about it will become very easy. If today someone asked you about what it meant to set up a podcast and run about 3 episodes or 4 episodes, the fact will come too quickly to you because you've done it. But if you're picking something about aerospace engineering and you're probably not, you would find yourself fumbling through it, and you don't even know if what you're saying is right or not. And so those are a few of the things I would say around public speaking.
Wow. I think I like your take on the aerospace engineering. I think there must be a reason why we say this is not rocket science. So I think choosing aerospace engineer was definitely a bad plan. Wow. So thank you for letting us know that. So definitely from what we're hearing from Emma, reading a lot really helps. And also knowing so much about your field and whatever you're doing grows the confidence. Wow. So that is quite a great lesson there. I think that will be something we can take home and we can learn from. So we'll just be diving into other aspects. Now, you have really founded a lot of stuff. A lot of initiatives have the name Emma Ofosua as the lead, right? And also you've been the member of the board of the Poetry Association of Ghana. You really trying to grow stuff and trying to build up many upcoming artists and many things. What has the life as a founder taught you, and what are some of the challenges? And what are the things that you're seeing even as underground artists that are coming up, especially within the poetry ecosystem?
That's like a layered question. Like I said 4 things in one, but I will try to
unraveling the box.
I would to break down. I think for one, I don't just set out to say I want to found a lot. I want to be founder for a lot of things. My heartbeat has always been that creatives should be able to live off their art. I have always been of the opinion that I should be able to say I am a poet, and the people shouldn't ask, what else do you do? It should make sense that I said I am a poet. That is a full stop. It's a full description of someone's profession. But you can't so much say that you are, because people know for sure that literature and poetry as we see it now does not pay. And so when you say that you're a poet, everybody is wondering, so what brings you money? My quest then has always been to set up system structures, help influence policies that ensure that the artist has in the future the opportunity to live off their art and be happy doing that in a society or an ecosystem that supports them and makes it possible for them to have access to opportunities. Hence, being excited about being part of initiatives that lean towards that, really. The challenge with that, though, is because you are threading a path that doesn't exactly have, you don't have an equal one to mimic, it becomes difficult to pave or go to a place no one has been, if I should put it like that. We've not so much seen so many poets. Exactly. So it's easy if you've seen someone do it and you're like, oh, let me copy. What did they do? We've seen so many podcasters. We have a good sense of what elements we need to set up a podcast studio in our home. People have done too many YouTube videos to show us how to go from scratch, setting up a podcast studio. But who tells you how to found an institution that supports poets when nobody has done it before? As much as possible, we've all been seen as free spirits and nobody tends to institutionalize that. So the things I dare to do are things that I haven't seen so many examples of, but I am not trying to do something no one has done before, but I'm just trying to make a living. And by so doing, help others do the same if they so desire to. It's challenging then because there's nothing to mimic. You have to solely rely on whatever it is your inspiration is. For me, it is God. So I have to be able to sharpen my spirit man to be able to pick up on things that I don't know. I haven't studied so much to understand the academics to this. So really it's by intuition that I do most of the things that I do, which tends to be challenging because you don't even have the language to explain what it is that you are working towards or doing or the path you're charting. So yes, it is challenging in that sense. For underground artists then, I think that, as my shirt says,
courage.
It says courage over fear. It says courage over fear.
Wow.
But for underground artists, you need a lot of courage.
It's the first plan before the plan.
To dare to live. Yeah. You need a lot of courage to say you want to live off your art. You cannot come at this hungry and expect this to feed you immediately. It doesn't work like that. At least I haven't seen it work like that. So for the time being, you would always have to have something you're doing that is feeding you, either if it's family supporting you, so you don't have to worry about bills and focus on the art, or that you have a job that brings a stable stream and allows you room, or you have the discipline to carve out time to do your work. The thing with this path for me and all of life, really, as I have come to understand, I am not that old, but I tend to speak with a lot of old folks. And so the understanding I have come to get is that all of life is about character development. And we will win at the things we set our minds to if the goal is to develop or to improve or to polish who we are becoming. Because then who we are becoming is much more important and does not have to be at the expense of the things we are pursuing. If I choose to become a very successful person as an artist, the things I do to be that successful person or the things I pursue should not be at the expense of who I am becoming, because that is what life is really about, the character building. So an underground artist will be able to excel in their art, in whatever they are doing, if the focus is, am I becoming a good version of me? Am I becoming someone that would impact positively on my society? Is the person I am becoming someone that people can emulate? Wow. In that is success, and it affects greatly the things you do. But if you are losing yourself, selling your soul, and giving up the treasure that is the person you are becoming, just for a second of fame or for money so you could be on a flight and everybody sees that you're on a flight, then really, is it worth it at the end of the journey? So it's patience, it's courage, it's being afraid and doing it scared anyway.
Wow. I think what you just shared is It definitely should be actually be written in a book. The first thing to know before taking this step. And you've really shed a light on so many things that creative artists should really, really have before they step out. And courage over fear definitely is one of them. And even the ability not to sell your soul, because I don't know, there are so many temptations to sell them, even for free, because
Yeah.
it's
Life
so
is
tough out there. And Emma, I just wanted to just appreciate you once again for even doing the Lord's work, because you're really building up a community. I've seen some of the stuff you do, even providing platforms for creatives to even share among themselves, and also have some way or platform to even demonstrate their gift. So there's no understatement to the things you do. And I just wanted my audience here to really know the kind of stuff that you do. It's actually a bold step, even pushing the African frontier in creative arts. So that is definitely the Lord's work being done right there. So we just appreciate you. Now, we just take a bit of a dive in a place that I think will be I'm very quite interested in. First, I want to just give me some side note on what really you really shared a bit of that in you speaking from the beginning about you journaling things and writing things, then processing stuff. But what has journaling really done for you as a writer, as a creative, journaling your ideas and experiences? What has it really done for you in that aspect?
Journaling has set me on a path to healing. There are so many things I did not understand. There are things I was battling that I didn't even know. There were things I was experiencing I didn't have language for. So journaling, what it did was help me put language to some of the things I couldn't or I didn't think I could express, or otherwise help me write so that when I stumbled on the right language for it, I knew what to match it to. Like the way we have primary things and they tell us to match the sound to the object. I think that is what journaling did for me. It helped me start working through how I internalize things when I'm upset, how I don't talk or assert myself when I want something done a certain way, how I felt that my voice didn't even have to be heard because I didn't have anything to say. It helped me rehash the value in myself and sets me on a path really to healing. And I don't think that I remember a lot of things. So journaling does help me remember things. And sometimes I start speaking and people are like, oh, you have a really good memory. I'm like, yo, my journal reminded me last week when I was preparing for this.
I
It's not
need to
like
query
I
my
have the
journal.
date. I feel like I
Wow.
have the dates. But I think and journaling made me find a friend in me, helped me enjoy my own company because then I don't think I was exactly the popular girl growing up in school. I wasn't the kind that everybody wants to hang and room with. At best, I think I was an awkward kid because either you are too smart for your own good, and so everybody feels like, yeah, you just don't know how to play, or that the things you say nobody seems to understand it. So it's like, it's just too difficult to talk to you.
It's too
And
much.
so I've had that a lot of times where I've even lost relationships because it turns out I'm too smart for my own good. So yeah, journaling became that friend that I would run to and pour out and clear my head and make room in my heart for the next thing because it was too much to hold in. So really, if anything, in one word, it has set me on to healing and it's taught me how to breathe because yeah, I just for most who know me, they know I sigh a lot. And I didn't even understand why I sigh a lot. I still do it, but I think now I think I was learning to breathe and I didn't know how. And I'm not even trying to be very deep or metaphorical about this. For real,
She's
real,
a
like at the
poet,
basic.
everybody. She's a poet.
No. Like I'm not even trying to wax lyrical. Like for real. I don't think I knew how to breathe. Journaling is how I learned to do that. and I'm
Wow.
still learning how to do that. So,
and as someone who doesn't journal so much, this has really taught me a lot. Even knowing even how the journaling process is and how it has even benefited you. And this sort of moves me straight into your book, I Wish You Courage in the Night. And definitely this when I read the book, I was quite enchanted by it, because I was expecting perhaps a story or something, and then I just realized I was just being given the opportunity to enter into the world of a person. So journaling must you really show the potential of that, what journaling does in that book. And for those who haven't checked it out, it's on Amazon. You can check it out. I've loved the book. It's been an amazing book. So you should definitely check it out. Just put a review on, and it will be a great work in pushing out most of the work there. So can you just give us a gist of what it took you even through that journaling process in writing the book, and what you aim your readers sort of get out from the book?
I think I set out writing I Wish You Courage first to wish me courage.
Wow.
It sounds
No, definitely deep, and I think it makes me want to read the book more.
Yeah, because I think I wrote something I needed in a time where I didn't find anything that spoke to me. And after I did that, I hoped that it would help others. And so it was wishing me the courage to own and tell my story. It was to own my scars and wear them proudly. It was wishing me the courage to hold my faith and not be ashamed of what I profess to be true. Because then I had been on so many platforms where people would interview you and ask, so you're a believer, but you don't tend to rub your work in people's faces, but how do you battle being on platforms where Christ is not elevated or all that? And for a long time, I didn't think I had the apt answer to such a question. So what journaling did and what writing the book did was helping me to stand firm in what I believed, but keep it at that. If my life ended up being a testimony to you, praise God. But otherwise, I wasn't coming to say, this is what I believe, and if you don't believe that, there's no hope for you. No, it was telling you my story as I had come to evolve through it. And that's what the book really is about. My journey through a night season into what looked like daylight. In the foreword, or in the preface, or the introduction, I think the introduction, I end that by saying I hoped that by the end of that collection, I would find myself in a semblance of what looked like sunflowers in a sunflower garden in full bloom. It meant I was still in the journey. I was still in what I will call my night season when I was writing that book. Most of the pieces from the collection didn't just come up the time I decided to publish. It was from the journey way back, a decade's worth of collection. So I would go back and pull everything I had written together and rewrite it and tailor it a certain way, but also have context for the journey, because it wasn't always gloomy. It had evolved a certain way. So to have that context, I had to go back to the archives, and it wouldn't exist if I didn't document it. So that's what journaling did. Actually, in the book, I include a journal template there to help whoever wants to start on their own journey with prompts or how to go about this whole journaling thing. So I don't know if I digress, but I guess
No,
that is
definitely.
what it looked like. Yeah, that's what it
You
looked
really
like.
placed a lot of jewels in that book, which definitely books have had different patterns all through, but you really put up a great degree of confidence in making journaling a thing which was relevant, and for you to have placed it out there. The reason why people connect a lot with the book is that you sort of make us all understand what is happening to each of us, and you sort of have words to really explain what is happening. So that was definitely why I personally even really connected to those sort of, as you took us on the journey from one chapter to one chapter. So definitely big ups to that for even the courage. And this also leads me to even this initiative being started, you sort of have really produced a new gem in African literature, in which this could be universal to any kind of culture, because normally what we've understood as African literature has always been capturing the stories of Africa, but we do not capture the story of Africa in a very personal note. In the work you did out there, what do you see for African literature? I'm sure that you've had a lot of experience reading books, maybe from Mama Taidu and all that. Was a composer for me as a high school student, so I won't forget her name, and several African writers that you may want to mention. So even as you've added your voice to the African writers out there, who are those that have really inspired you throughout this journey? And what are you looking up in the future for African literature in itself?
I'm trying to find. Yeah. So I didn't read a lot of African literature growing up. My go-tos were the what do they call those things? I've even forgotten. Barney's, I think the Barnes and Nobles books about young girls, but in American setting. I would read the Danielle Steele's. I would read. I had like
Sorry. Who read Enid Blyton as a kid? Looks like I grew up and nobody read Enid Blyton again.
No. I would read Enid Blyton. I would read Danielle Steele. I would read all those kind of books, but African literature. Like, I think for me, because I also wasn't a student of English, I didn't have the compulsory reads that school made us do. I would come to want to dig into African literature just about a year ago, when I set out questioning myself, who really is the African? Because then I had gotten into spaces where I was being described as an African writer, an African woman. And I was wondering, so who is the African woman and who am I as an African writer? And trying to understand what the terminology meant and what's the responsibility with that label. What was the responsibility if I was called an African writer? And it's a journey I am still on. So maybe this understanding may evolve down the line. But that I live in Africa and on the continent, and elements of the continent lives in me. When I tell my story from a very personal angle, I am telling an African story. How I grew up, the foods I ate when I was growing up, the things that made me cry and the things that made me laugh, what made me want to crawl back into my shell and what made me want to dare to live differently. All these are things that an African child has experienced in a certain context. And so it makes it a valid African story. Wow. That would make me want to find similar stories. And TJ Benson's People Live Here Too is one of the reads I started with. I met TJ in Lagos when I did Lagos Poetry Festival 2 years ago, I think. And I grabbed a copy of his book. I would meet him later and connect with him and love the way he writes and his story. So that was pretty much what I loved. I would love Chimamanda's works. Chimamanda writes beautifully and articulates herself in a way that I absolutely admire, with the calm confidence of someone who knows the story she's telling. Yeah. So I would come to read most of their books because I didn't want to say something or blab along a rhetoric that I had heard people say. I wanted it to be something I had experienced. So definitely Chimamanda was one. And then last year, I was coming to do the All African Women Poetry Festival and wanted to celebrate Amata Edu. So I went digging for her works and understanding her journey, her stories. And so I was
book still haunts me up to now. Some of the books I read. He has peculiar
Yeah,
stories.
I would dig into exactly. I would dig into the archives and find some of her stories and how she would mix, she would code switch between Fanti and English and write interestingly. It is telling an African story, a unique experience that belongs to an African in a certain context, how she shaped her characters. And she would talk about structures and things that exist within our African society, the Ghanaian society. And then I think my recent book. So lately, I've been reading a lot of African writers because I think you can only understand when you go to source and context and dig into people's individual stories. I think my recent read was Everything Will Be All Right. That's what I've been trying to find. I think I just finished it, so it's somewhere on my deck. I seem to find it, but Everything Will Be All Right. I think is, but those are a few of the writers, and I think as poets, really, I love Cynthia Amower's works. So she is a poet. She's Ghanaian, but she's based in the US. So her works are ones that I admire. Also because I've gotten to work with her a few times. Dr. Ansong writes pretty beautifully. But all these people you see write from a very personal, interesting place of experiences and things they have experienced, being the African children living in the diaspora, or that Africans themselves telling a Nigerian story, a Ghanaian story, or a story that is unique and only an African can relate to. So this is pretty much a few of the mentions as I am now digging into Africa. So I kind of have kept a whole line of just African authors because I'm trying to being deliberate about finding stories told by Africans in a unique and beautiful way, so that it better informs me to kind of tell my own story well as well.
Thanks so for that mentions, and I think we'll just be noting them down in the description. So in case anyone wants to check up on the wonderful work that has been done by all these mentions, I'm sure you will love it, because if Emma says it's wow,
the last one, I think the last one was Ogadima. Ogadima, Everything Will Be All Right.
Wow.
That's the
wow, beautiful. Yeah. And I think one I couldn't just leave this podcast with that one mention, which is the African Writers series. When I was a kid, my mom used to send me to the library for the African Writers series, and it's a collection of all novels from Africa, from different countries. So it was a series from everyone. Up to now, I still remember all those stories. King Solomon's Mines, One in a Million, different stories. So I think recently I was just asking her if she could get me all those parts. And the reason why I still remember those stories, it makes me know people from Uganda, South Africa, Kenya, and the way they think. So it's high time that African literature was quite promoted in that same way. And even as Emma is making mention of all these amazing writers, I think you should all go check them out. They do great, amazing works. I know you've been reading a lot of watching a lot of Harry Potter and reading a lot of Harry Potter, but you should be reading a lot of African literature too. It's pretty amazing. So definitely, we'll be moving on to something that you're really passionate about, which is women in literature, women in arts. So, can you just tell me what has been happening for women in arts? I think you're the only one who can speak to this. You are the oracle. So over to you, Emma.
I think I do not think that I'm the oracle yet. I think there are other people in the space who have done remarkable at making or at amplifying young African women voices on the continent and around the globe. But for me, I think that over the years, what we've come to understand as the African narrative are stories that have been told by men. And this is not even to go on any tangent. It's simply stating the facts. Most stories that we have read over and over and over have been told by men. Even half of the literature books we studied in school, or those that studied literature studied in school, were by male authors. And I think that when the African woman tells her story, it brings a unique twist to the narratives that we hear.
She's the real storyteller.
And really, women are better storytellers. Women are better storytellers. Women are better storytellers. So what I've set out to do is to try and create one more space in addition to the already existing spaces to make sure that African women have room to tell their story. And if they so choose poetry as the medium, then there's home here for them to tell that story. I think it's also important because, I mean, classic case in point. I live in Accra, which is the capital of Ghana. And usually if I'm going to town, you would drive on, and Prof. Sutherland drew my attention to this thing. But you would be driving on the Kanda, which happens to be one of the, should I call it a city? Yeah, I don't know. One of the places in Accra. And you'd realize that the streets is divided into two, where the men are sitting on one side, playing draft and dummy and just sitting, chilling under the trees. And on the other side of the road, you will see the women trading, selling cocoa, drying beans or drying whatever they want to dry, and just cooking, taking care of kids and doing all that. These two extremes exist on one street in the heart of Accra. And you wonder, what stories do these women have to tell? When they wake up from dawn and dusk comes to meet them, what entails, or what does their day entail? How have they experienced the things they have experienced? And who really is documenting those tales? They will be gone and nobody would know that a group of people lived this kind of life in this place in the heart of Accra. So books like Manuscripts from Accra, written by Paulo Coelho, is one that, I mean, it's not Accra as Accra, but the title and the things he writes in them kind of nudges me towards wanting to all the better amplify women's voices so that years to come, the Ghanaian woman would have had her story told. The African woman story will not be missing in translation, and credit will be given where it's due, because she did what she said she did and she documented it, or somebody documented it. I don't want 10 years to come and people do not know that I did, or I have been able to do the work I have done in the poetry space. Credit should be given where it's due. But if I don't tell that story and nobody dares to tell that story on my account, who would know that a girl dared to believe and made room for others? And so it happened the way it happened. It is not pride. It is not arrogance. It is deciding to tell my narrative that I existed. And this is what I did in that lifespan, and giving other people the room to do the same, and making resources available where I can so that they do the same. Hence the All African Women Poetry Festival, making sure that we bring all stories together and share and trade, understand that the struggles, the challenges, they are not unique to Ghanaians. If we're talking about the dating scene in Accra, it's life in Lagos, it's life in South Africa, it's the same. If we're talking about the economics of being an artist, it's similar to what is happening. What do other West Africans experience by their government, by their day-to-day, their geography, the economy, the environment, the climate change? How is it affecting them? How are South Africans doing it? How are Southern Africans experiencing it? It's a beautiful mix when we trade stories, and we are all the more enlightened because we cared enough to listen to other people's stories. And I think for the next phase of my life, until I get another assignment, that is what I hope to commit to make sure that women tell their story and they get the opportunity and the resources to do so.
Wow. And it's such a great thing to really sense this call. It's like the invisible eye that's passing through the city and observing what nobody seemed to see. And definitely that's the amazing thing about poets and writers is the ability to see what everybody seems to not have noticed, but you sense that call. And from the way we've really even captured up all these stories up to this far, one thing I declare is that Emma has a great calling, and the mission is to land the ball at the right place at the end of the day. How has overcoming fear and anxiety, because you see in your shared courage, what has this ability to just take on this call necessitated faith in Jesus for you? What has Jesus played in ensuring that you not only walk on the waters, but also are able to brace all the scary things that happen in the African sea?
You make it sound magnificent. I think that, can I even put words to this? My faith is all I have. Because sometimes I look at the things a friend of mine told me, and I think she was being very honest. She's like, the things you tend to dream about and talk about are big ticket items. And I think the day she said it, I was like, I just glossed over it. But when I got back and thought through it, I'm like, you don't really dream small. And I've had a couple of friends say it, but the things I dream about and
I can also say it too. You dream beyond where we all see. That's always so beautiful.
Yeah, they are always big ticket items. So faith is all I have, because it is the evidence of things not seen. And the things I tend to, that my heart leans towards, are things I have not seen and can only hope that they happen. I am laughing because it is not funny. And that's the more reason why I am laughing about these things. I have had to do things afraid. I still battle with anxiety. Now the panic attacks are not so much as they used to, because I have come into a better understanding of what it means to trust and let go. It is not an easy journey, because I have to daily wake up and let go of control and let God handle what he can. And what he has done over the time, over the period, as I can testify to, is that he always opens doors. He always opens the next door when one season is closing. He always makes sure the next thing is provided for. I don't know how, but he does it. And sometimes I can come too close to a deadline and I really don't have an idea where the next fund is going to come from, who is going to decide to take a chance on the dream that I sold them. But somewhat, the next morning will come and somebody will decide to take a chance. So I don't take credit for any of it. I think that it is purely God, but it is also him working in me to understand what it means to yield. Because really, it is what the Bible says. It is he who works in us both to will and to do according to his good pleasure. And so our point is to yield and let him work out what he's already worked in us. So then the quest for finding purpose and finding who we are, which is not exactly a question you've asked, but I think I sense to lean towards that. The thing with purpose, as we've come to understand over the years, is to go find purpose. So we've always been out there looking for what our purpose is and where our purpose is and who can point us in the direction of our purpose. But this journey has revealed to me that purpose is within. It's not something you go out finding. It is something you dig in to bring out. And that is all I have done, really, submitting totally to the one who I know created me and understands what it is he wants me to do. If he put me here and I am alive in 2023, there's a reason. if he's still keeping me alive at this point, there must be a reason. And so if he has already worked it in me, then in working it out, I need him to guide the way and to point me in which direction to go. And he knows what is there. So he would know an Anoche will be a better person, or an Arthur will be a better person, or a Sandra will be a better person, or a whoever will be a better person to speak to at this particular time. And what he does is he orchestrates it to happen. And all I do is to sit pretty and ready and go, what is the next assignment? And just do. So pretty much that is where faith comes in my journey. It's really all I have.
Wow. And it's, to summarize, this is just a one-liner in the Bible, which I think definitely matches to what Emma does on a daily basis. The just shall live by her faith. So it's such a great thing to really see an example of what you do up in the city of Accra, showing us that Jesus' words, follow me, really works. And he has definitely he has definitely led you so far in this journey. And it's remarkable where he has taken you. So thank you for being an example to us, or that we should just move by the faith that is assigned to us, and God will back up his words. Yeah. So in reading your book, one of the things that really encouraged me in the book when you wrote was voices. And I could just feel the dilemma at the point you had to reach when you had to choose between what you felt was your call and what the world believed you should do. And I think most of us really have that sort of crossroad moments where we now have to choose what the world is telling us to move to and what we sense God is really calling us to do. So you can speak to that, and then perhaps you can finish off with your final words.
I think it's important for every young person and every individual to establish for themselves who has the final say in their lives. It's such, it seems very simple, but it's a very important step you need to take. Because then who speaks into you has the potential to kill what it is that you have or give it life. Words carry that much power. And so for voices, I really spent a big part of my adulting or young years, formative years, if I should put it, wanting to be what everybody said and wanting to belong so bad. Because really, like, everybody has a clique, everybody has like a good community, and I didn't have any. So I would do anything just to belong. And that sets me in a place where everybody was seeming to speak into my life. And I would take everything they said, line, hook, and sinker. Like, because I'm a person of words, and I don't even say it lightly, like, I live by words. Everything anybody said was that held that much weight, and it shouldn't be. Not everybody's words should hold the same amount of weight in your life. And so when you are in a formative space and you are deciding for yourself what path to go on, who to listen to, how to guide your life, there is a saying that you are the average of the top 5 people around you. What does it mean, really? It simply means who is speaking into your life, and who are you looking at, and who are you mimicking or trying to model your life after. So voices was a way to cut out the fluff and decide for myself whose voice was the final thing. I am still figuring that phase out, trying to do more like an internal audit on who gets to be friend and who gets to have a voice and who gets to be an overseer or say something important when I come to a significant decision point. But everybody would need that. And you would have to establish what you believe, because underlining all that is your source. And you would have to establish what that source is for you individually. For believers, I hope that your source becomes God and his word. But otherwise, whatever you believe, find a source that you always go to, because it is very pivotal to what you will become eventually. Yeah, so I think in answering the question, I kind of have said my closing statement, because all of life is about us becoming who God set us out to be. It is shaping us to be people of good character. I believe this is what life is about. Until that idea changes, this is what I stand by. And if all of life is about becoming who God wants us to be, and it is about developing a character that makes us people of virtue and value, then you would want to establish whose voice shapes that path for you. My sheep know me, they hear my voice. And so, who is calling you, and which direction are you walking in based on the voices you're hearing? When you establish that, it doesn't become too easy, but it becomes bearable to go through the challenges, because we will have trouble in this life, but it becomes bearable.
Wow. And it's so encouraging to really have seen that you chose the right voice eventually, and that is to follow God. So we are always flawed by the guests that we always bring aboard on this podcast. So definitely Emma Ofosua has been such a great guest, and we really enjoyed this discussion. We are all here to support her, and definitely you should check out her Instagram. We'll put all the links below. And in case you want to follow her wonderful work and also be inspired by most of the initiatives she has started, we'll catch up same time on another episode. This is Speaking of God podcast, where we aim to change the narrative and bring God back into the conversation. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to reading your review, though.
I owe you one.